In this exercise, we're going to create some cover letters using mail merge. We'll have a single template document that has most of the text of our cover letter for our resumes. We're going to do some job applications. And then we have a list of jobs, and we're going, for each of the jobs, we're going to generate a cover letter specific for that job. And that's the advantage of mail merge. It lets you create a template document, and then customize it for each individual record from your data source. So we'll begin by looking at our Excel spreadsheet that is our data source. It doesn't always have to be Excel. It could be a database. More often it is. It could be a formatted text file, like we've seen, tab delimited, comma separated values, and so forth. Or it could be another Word document, in fact, if the fields have been set up in a certain way. But Excel is very common to use. And here we have a series of fields: company, contact, first name, last name. Salutation, very common for how we address the message to whoever it is we're sending it to, and then some address information, then also what type of job it is, where I found out the job, and what the position will be that I'm trying to apply for. And of course, these are all fictitious jobs. Now we begin all of our mail merge in Word. That's the controlling application program that does all of this. And you can start with just a blank document, but in this case we've started with a template already sort of filled out with some fields that we want to replace from our data source in all caps, so contact name, company name, etc. So we'll begin, before we get to the mail merge, date is not something we're going to pull out of the data source because it's independent of all of those jobs. So we'll just fill in today's date. Now we could type it in. And Word's very helpful. As soon as it looks like you're typing a date, it'll try and fill it in. But we'll just see how to use a Word field. And from the Insert menu, if I choose Field, and then there's a whole bunch of them, so I'll sort of narrow it down to date and time and choose date. And that's just today's date. And here's a number of formats that we can choose. So I'll choose the long one that includes the day of the week. And you can customize it as well. And I'll click OK. And it will just fill in today's date. If I open this file up tomorrow, that's going to be Monday, November 29th, 2010. If I click on it, notice how the background turns gray. That's Word signaling to you, we've seen this before, that that is a Word field and it's under Word's control. We don't want to type inside of it. The other field, of course, is name. That would be our own name. And so I'll just put in whatever I like. You can also use a field from Word. If you've set up Word to have your name already, that's one of the other fields that's available. But I'll just type in some random name. And now we'll get to going with our mail merge, which is taking those fields out of our data source, the Excel spreadsheet, and having Word plug them in. Maybe there's 10 rows of data in our data source, maybe there's 1,000, but either way the process is the same. And we begin by, from the Tools menu, choosing Letters and Mailings, and then Mail Merge. That's where it hides, and it will guide us through, there'll be a sidebar, and it will guide us through a 6-step process. Handily scroll this down. Here's step 1 of 6 over on the right hand side. Here's our Mail Merge sidebar. And for the very first step, what type of document are we working with? Yes, we're doing letters. Envelopes lets you do mailing envelopes or mailing labels, and a directory is like a catalog, that sort of thing. But most of the time you'll be doing letters. And I'll skip ahead to step 2. You can use the current document, start from an existing document that you haven't opened already, but we've already got the current document, so I'll skip ahead. For any of these steps, we can go back if we make a mistake. And now to select the recipients. So this is recipients of our letter. This is where our data source is coming from. And we can choose from an existing list, which we're going to do, or if you use Outlook, you can choose from that address book, or you can type in a new one just right away, but usually you'll use an existing one, and we'll browse for it. And it just so happens to be on my desktop. By default, it'll try and connect you to a database, but I'll connect to the joblist.xls on my desktop. And I'll open it up, and it'll ask me which tab, because a workbook, of course, in Excel can have many worksheets. We have to pick one of them, and it happens to be called Addresses. And I'll say OK. And then it will give me a listing, essentially, of the worksheet. So I see all of the records, and if there's some that I don't like, that I don't want to use, I can uncheck them here. Or I can just use a search criteria to only find some of them. But I'm going to choose all of them. And I'll say OK. Now that's my data source. I'm ready to continue on and fill in my mail merge fields as the next step in step 4. So here we write our letter, and here's where, in this case, we're going to replace these capitalized suggestions with actual word fields. This is just me. When I typed this out, I just typed in the word salutation. But now we're going to replace that with an actual word mail merge field. And to choose them, I go to More Items and choose the one I want, Salutation. And that would be Mr., Mrs., and so forth. And I'll say Insert. And I'll just close for now. Notice how it just it replaces it with this inside these little sort of chevrons. And that's going to be, notice how I click on it, it turns gray. That means it's a word field. I'll just do the contact last name as well. So More Items again. Contact last name, here it is there. Insert, close. And I'll put a comma at the end because that's how you usually start a Mr. Smith, comma. That's how you start a letter. Now, if any time I want to see what is this going to look like, I can skip ahead to the next step, to step 5, just to get a preview. And here's an example. Notice how it now says Mr. Cramden. The previous fields that I saw there before with the chevrons have now been replaced with actual data from the data source. And using these little VCR style buttons, I can go to the next row in my data source, Mr. Grumby, Mrs. Brady, Major Nelson, Mr. Stivic, and so forth. So I can go through my data source all the way, as many as you have. We've got 10. Sorry, we only have 8. Mr. Sanford is our last. These are all television characters from decades ago, but I can skip ahead to step 5. But now I'm done. I can go back to the previous step and continue on. Here's my fields again. So now I can fill in the rest. So I'll replace contact name with the first name and last name. So I'll go to More Items, Contact First Name, Insert, Contact Last Name. I'll just do them both at once. But of course I want to put a space between them, because I don't want the first name to run right into the last name. There should be a space. For company name, I'll replace that with a company. Close. For street address, so we're just filling in a standard addressing block, More Items. So street address, insert, close, and then city, region, postal code, I'll do all at once. I'll say More Items, city, insert, region, insert, that would be Yukon or a province or a state, postal code, insert, close. And of course, between city and region, I want to put a comma and a space. That's standard. Between the region and a postal code, it's a tradition to put 2 spaces, one of those places where you still put in 2 spaces. For position, I was very interested to see your advertisement for a position. So I want to replace that with what was the position that I'm actually applying to. It will be called something different for every company. So I'll insert that position, and where did I find the posting? Posting found, there it is. I've been seeking just such an opportunity in the field, whatever activity is. So I'll fill that in as well. And there it is. My resume is enclosed for review. Perhaps it's your fantasy resume. Wouldn't that be lovely? And there's all my fields plugged in. Oh, let's take a preview. Let's see if we did this right. Ralph Cramden, Carmax Hotel, Box 160, Carmax, YT, 2 spaces, and then the postal code. There's our date, Mr. Cramden. Position for a accounting bookkeeper. Okay, so we have a little bit of an issue with grammar here. That should be an accounting bookkeeper, but we'll just wait a second before we address that one. I've been seeking such an opportunity in the accounting field, and so this letter has now been tailored for that accounting job. But if I skip ahead to recipient 2, we'll see for a curator. Well, the grammar's fine there. A curator, no problem there. In Yukon Work and Infonet is where I found the listing for a museum in the museum's operations field. For a mechanic, that's fine. An auto repair field. For Anthony Nelson, for a sales associate in the sales field. Here we have another grammar problem for a assistant retailer. Of course, that should be an assistant retailer in the sales field. So there's a couple of records there. Michael Stivic, you remember him as Meathead from All in the Family. And we can go through them all. We could see most of them are fine, but there's a couple where it says a and then something with a vowel, and that should be an in English. So we'll skip back to just skip through the records, quickly look at them. The rest looks fine. So before I complete the merge, I'm going to go previous back, And what I'm going to do, how am I going to fix this? Well, sometimes the position, here's the problem. We have an A here, and sometimes the position starts with a vowel, and we can't have A there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that A, that article, the indefinite article, and I'm going to remove it from my document. So it just says for position, and I'm going to put the article into my data source, either A or and, depending, in the position field, and that way it'll always do the correct grammatical thing. So from my data source here, there's position. I'll just edit, that should be an accounting bookkeeper, a curator, don't forget the space, a mechanic, a sales associate, and an assistant retailer. So anytime that you had to make some sort of sentence or grammar difference because of a field, you may consider doing just this, putting the part that changes into the data source as well. If there's a lot of rows, this could take a while, but we've only got 8. So there we go. I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to return to my my letter, and I'm just going to see if it picks it up automatically. Nope. So I'm going to have to go previous. I'm going to use an existing list. I'm going to select a different list and just pick the same one again, just to force it to pick up the same. I've saved it in Excel, so I'm going to force it to pick up the same data source. And the addresses worksheet again. Here it all is. Here's the position. Notice it's got the it's got all of the articles that I put in. Say OK, and now I can go on. There's my where I'd insert my fields, and finally step 5, an accounting bookkeeper, a curator, a mechanic, a sales associate, an assistant retailer. It's doing the right thing. A computer tomography technologist. Well, that's complicated. A primary language arts teacher. So the positions are fairly lengthy, or can be. A receptionist. Now everything's working. Of course, the gray won't show up. My next step would be to complete the merge, and that will actually generate, we'll take my template and for each record in my data source, create a new document. They'll all be attached together in one huge document with section breaks in between them. So next, complete the merge, and I'm just, instead of print, because I don't want to print it out right away, I'm just going to edit individual letters, which just creates the Word document for me. And I'll say all records. And here's the result that we see. It just creates a new document, and here's the first, Ralph Cramden for an accounting bookkeeper. The second page is the second job, Jonas Grumby. If you don't recognize that name, that's the skipper from Gilligan's Island. Carol Brady of the Brady Bunch, of course, all by itself. Anthony Nelson. No idea, was that Major Dad? I'm not sure. Michael Stivic was Meathead, but we see Samantha Stevens from Bewitched. Rhoda Morgenstern from oh, what was that show? Mary Tyler Moore, there we go. And Lamont Sanford from Sanford and Son. So good old shows from the 70s and earlier, or around that time. Each page is its own letter. We get 8 pages because we had 8 data source records. And now I can print this off, perhaps even do another mail merge for the envelopes, send them all off, but I've created job-specific cover letters for each of the people I'm applying to, and that looks a little better than a standard non-specific. I am interested in a job at your company. I am interested in this job for an accounting bookkeeper at the in your company. That's much more specific and hopefully likely to get a positive response. And that's the end of the exercise.